Okay, what about the deadlift? Well, I am a big fan of the deadlift. I think it's one of the best exercises for building total body strength. However, when we look at the criteria for a S-tier back builder, it doesn't score too well. It doesn't stretch your lats or mid-back much at all. It also doesn't take your lats or traps through an active range of motion. So any tension they do receive is isometric. And I don't know about you, but deadlifts don't give me a great back pump. And while they are easy to overload, you can always add some weight or some reps, that's usually because your hamstrings and glutes are getting stronger, not necessarily your back. As a back builder, the deadlift is going in C tier. I'm not putting it in D or F tier just because it will beef up your spinal erectors and thicken up that lower part of your back. But as a pure back hypertrophy exercise, I do think there are far better options.
Okay, so clearly deadlifts are a compound movement. They do heavily involve the back, but they also involve a lot of lower body as well as forearms. Despite that, in my experience, I believe that deadlifts are a fantastic hypertrophy exercise. It's important to stress that fitness can be a very nuanced and individual endeavor. So I'm not trying to make any absolute statements necessarily, but instead provide a different perspective. Recently, the highly respected science-based fitness fella, Jeff Nippard, released a video ranking back exercises on a tier list, with hypertrophy being the main consideration. On said list, the deadlift received a C grade. This was not surprising for me considering that this is an opinion echoed by many in the fitness space. Most will not declare that deadlifts are a bad exercise, but perhaps not the best for hypertrophy, especially in regards to the back. This is for reasons such as the movement's high stimulus to fatigue ratio, as well as the fact that it does not isolate the back in any way. But again, my experience has been very different, but there are some specifics that must be listed. The deadlift is my personal favorite lift. Whether conventional, hex bar, sumo, whatever. I love the movement, and enjoyment is a huge part of success with progress. With that, I have deadlifted almost every week for the last 4 years. It is the movement that involves the back that I prioritize most. And interestingly, my back is arguably my most developed muscle group. Of course, this could be a genetic thing, but I do believe that argument can be a cop-out, though still worth considering. And this is not to say that it's the only back exercise that I perform, but it's the one that I prioritize. And this is not only with hypertrophy in mind, but also function and athleticism, as I am not just a bodybuilder, but also a BJJ roller. How I approach the deadlift is with the heaviest weight that I can control for the highest amount of reps. And the eccentric, or the lowering portion of the lift, must be controlled. Otherwise, I do believe that hypertrophy will be hindered. So don't drop the bar once the weight is lifted. And I do encourage lifting straps, at least on the heaviest sets, as to not allow the grip to interfere with the rest of the body's ability. I also incorporate a lot of deficit work, which I find to be highly beneficial as it increases the overall range of motion and weighted stretch. But yeah, the deadlift may not isolate the back, but you can load the movement more than most isolated movements. So I do feel like that may make up for the lack of isolation. And though not back focused, you're essentially hitting every muscle in the back, including upper, lower, and mid. But I can only speak for my experience and not for the other trainers here at Success Fitness. So here are some thoughts from a couple of my fellow trainers.
All right, Coach Hunter.
Hello.
I'm curious. So talking about deadlifts here, and you can say whatever you want about deadlifts, but I'd like to specifically know why, or what you think about their place as a hypertrophy exercise for the back.
The back specifically.
Yes, honest thoughts.
Well, I think that if you look across a lot of, say, contest athletes, which I'm a judge in natural bodybuilding, I've seen a lot of athletes, a lot of the people that have really good erectors and thick backs, they deadlift heavy. Is it a direct correlation to back size? I'm skeptical. Personally, I don't do deadlifts for back hypertrophy. I don't think they're bad. I think that if you're somebody that wants to spend a ton of time in the gym, you might be slightly better off just doing more back exercises like bent rows and all this kind of different stuff. And I've noticed that my low back recovery is not the greatest. So I feel like by the time I can do deadlifts for back, all these other back exercises, and then I'm also trying to train my hamstrings and my quads with like things like squats and good mornings and hamstring curls, all that kind of stuff. It's just too much fatigue on my low back. So that's why I don't do deadlifts for back development, but I would say they're a good exercise. I would just be skeptical if somebody only had deadlifts in for their back workout. Like, you're probably missing out on a lot. You're not really actually taking the back through really any range of motion except for maybe the spinal erectors.
Sure.
I think deadlifts for myself and for a lot of my clients, we're usually trying to more so focus on hamstrings or glute development with deadlifts. Back might be a little bit of a side effect. I mean, that's almost like a debate in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like, do you train do you train deadlifts on back day, or do you train deadlifts on leg day?
It's hard to know where to put it sometimes, right?
Yeah, so
that's fair.
But I think if you're looking at back development, I think you're going to be looking probably at a conventional deadlift, or maybe even a sumo deadlift, just because it puts you into a really advantageous position to lift a lot of weight versus like stiff leg deadlift. Even like RDL, although RDLs, because you're constantly holding the tension, I think they can be good for the upper back as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think sometimes if you look at how many exercises you can do, if you're not doing deadlifts, then the deadlift becomes almost obsolete to even do. If you could just be like, well, I could do 4 sets of deadlifts or potentially 20 sets of back, which honestly sounds crazy, but I think that the systemic fatigue might be similar with those two, depending on how strong you are.
Sure.
I would almost say that 20 sets of back work, direct back work, might be better than the deadlifts. So I don't know. I would put it lower priority on my list of back training, to be totally honest, but I think they're amazing for hamstring development. So
sure.
I do stiff leg deadlifts pretty often, and good mornings have been kind of my go-to lately for the glute and hamstring development. So
would you say though adding a deficit kind of changes it a little bit?
I usually do stiff leg with a deficit.
Oh sure.
I don't do deficit good mornings, obviously.
Deficit
good mornings, you bring your head down under your feet.
I was gonna say. That'd be a good night at that point.
I usually do deficit stiff leg deadlifts. I like that a lot. I think that it can be a decent spinal erector exercise, but I think if you're performing a stiff leg deadlift properly, you're not really working the spinal erectors nearly as much as you are the hamstrings. So, yeah. And then I would say, one caveat that I would have is if you're really going into the gym and you're doing deadlifts for back hypertrophy, then take your weightlifting belt off and try to build your spinal erectors. Versus if you're trying to build the hamstrings, then you could wear a weightlifting belt and then the low back doesn't become the limiting factor. Look at a lot of lifters over in the UK, like they do a lot of beltless pulls and they have some super thick spinal erectors, which I don't know if it's 100% necessary to like have a great physique, but if you want that, then it's good for you. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, I like it. It's very thought out.
It's a lower tier, like I said, on the priority list of like best back movements in my opinion. I think you'd be better off pulling from the floor, like doing a bent over row with a barbell or something like that. But that's just me.
So you probably agree with Jeff Nippard's C rating for its back hypertrophy capability?
I would say so.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you, Hunter. I appreciate it. Great thoughts. Coach Grace with a jacked back. I would love to hear your thoughts on where the deadlift falls as far as a hypertrophy exercise for the back.
You really think I have a jacked back?
Oh yeah, absolutely I do.
Yeah, you've snuck some videos of my back, and I'm like, oh, I do have a
You in fact do.
Okay.
Oh, much of the picture is jacked, but I just wanted to highlight, yes, your back is in fact stand out.
Well, so okay, let's start with that, because I think I actually do have like more of that V back than a lot of women want or have, and I deadlift all the time. I love deadlifting.
Yeah.
Conventional, RDLs, sumos, hex bar, single-legged, love deadlifts. So maybe now that you've posed this question, I have to consider the fact of deadlifts being pretty high on the ranking for a back hypertrophy exercise. However, historically I haven't really programmed them that way for myself or clients. I view the deadlift as like the king of compound posterior chain exercises, and love them for back stability and back strength, and teaching that hip hinge pattern. And I love the versatility of deadlifts, whether we want to be more back focused or more glute focused or more hamstring focused, and then using the varieties out there to create a nice overall posterior chain strength line. But again, I've never necessarily regarded them as a hypertrophy exercise, I would typically go more to lat pulls, again, in all of their varieties, rows in all of their varieties, using a combination of those, pullovers, pull downs, those sorts of things. But now you have me thinking, and now I think I need to consider this because you have a jacked back and
thanks.
you deadlift all the time. I'm super curious to hear what other people's thoughts are because we got a lot of jacked backs up in this joint. Have you asked Nick yet?
No,
Nick
I
Z?
haven't.
What
No.
Nick Z says. He's
gone all weekend.
Crap.
I don't know if
I
I'll be
know
able to get
some-
his take. I don't know if I'll be able to.
Well, I know some people, I know one person I can think of right off the top of my head who he has a crazy jack back and he never deadlifts. He says he's injured. I don't know if I believe it, but he says he's injured and that's why he doesn't deadlift. But no, I believe him. I'm sure he is. But he's like, I never deadlift and his back is jacked. So I don't know. I'm so torn on this, Tom. And so I love this question. So thank you for posing this question because it's a good one. And I'm sorry I don't have a real direct answer.
No, it's okay. And it's not even to say that deadlifts are a must for if you want to achieve a big back. I just think they tend to get disregarded in the hypertrophy realm. And I think that with certain considerations such as, you know, especially if you're controlling that eccentric, that's big. And I noticed that that's something that you do when you deadlift.
Absolutely.
You never just drop it.
And that's what, hold on, let's pause there. Everyone should control the eccentric on their deadlifts every single time.
Yeah.
I understand that there is powerlifting out there, but deadlift gets a bad rep because you constantly hear people say like, oh, you shouldn't deadlift, it's so bad for your back. No, it's like one of the best things you can do for your back.
Yeah.
I know that, you know, everyone's different and people have special considerations, but if you are controlling that eccentric, you're going to be better off for it and have a super strong back. So, and then you and I talked about deficit. So if you do it as a deficit, then even more, hi Heather,
That has even more,
more opportunity there for hypertrophy, and you're just going to get more muscle activation. So, man, this is a great question. I love it, and I agree. They are disregarded as a hypertrophy exercise for the back, but I don't think they should be.
That's all I was looking for.
Finally got to the answer.
Some love for the deadlift hypertrophy angle,
Yeah, all the love for deadlifts in general, absolutely. And I know I feel like we say this every time we ask a question, but just from what we've discovered here now, talking through this, I think it absolutely depends on the person too.
Yeah.
Because I can absolutely think of people
always.
with super jack backs that don't deadlift or that's not their go-to back exercise. We all pretty much consistently deadlift some form of deadlifts.
Oh yeah.
At least once a week, if not. I deadlift in every one of my workouts, just a different form every time. Well, that's not true. I didn't deadlift today.
Wow, Grace.
I lied.
So sad. I'm very disappointed.
I'm disappointed myself too. I don't think I have convention. No, I do. I don't have RDLs in my program right now. Or Hex. I have sumo. And I have. Oh yeah, took Hex out because you know what? I was getting so happy on my Hex, and I hit some PRs week after week. But then my traps were so jacked and tight, and I was like, I think I gotta back off. Like this hurts so bad.
Yes, and the traps are part of the back, upper back.
Dang it!
Just
Dang
saying.
it, Tom.
I mean, I don't do any direct trap work, and I feel like my traps are perfectly developed. So
They are. You're very nice traps.
oh wow, thank
You're
you.
just a very nice, muscular person.
Oh,
What do we
right
say?
back at ya.
Dense piece of muscle.
Hey now, that's right. All right, well, that's basically all I needed, Grace.
All
But
right.
I really appreciate
Thanks
you.
for chatting.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the question.